The chandeliers of Hofburg Palace held more than light. They held secrets. Behind the shimmering silks and the polite bows, fortunes were made and lost hearts were broken, and empires shifted. The Habsburg court, a place of unimaginable wealth and rigid etiquette, hosted balls that were grand stages for ambition, romance, and quiet desperation. These were not just parties, they were battlegrounds of beauty and power, where every glance, every whisper held consequence. Number 10. The Archduchess's Gambit Masked Ball. The chill of November 1888 settled over Vienna. But inside the sprawling Hofburg Palace, the air was warm with perfume. Archduchess Marie Valerie, the beloved youngest daughter of Emperor Franz Joseph and Empress Elizabeth, was not the focus tonight. The imperial family was present, of course, a dazzling constellation of diamonds and military braid. But the true spectacle was the masked nature of the evening. It was a charity ball, ostensibly to raise funds for the city's orphans. Yet everyone knew it was an opportunity for something far more personal. A carefully orchestrated game of social chess. Count Stefan Czernin, a man whose family fortune was as old as the Danube itself, moved through the crowd with an easy confidence. His mask, a simple black velvet half-face, concealed little of his aristocratic swagger. His eyes, however, betrayed a focused intent. Tonight he sought not a dance partner, but an alliance. His family's lands in Bohemia were vast, but their influence at court had waned in recent years, overshadowed by newer, more ambitious bloodlines. He needed to reassert his position. His target for the evening was Archduke Otto Franz, a cousin of the emperor, and a known enthusiast for gambling and beautiful women. Otto's financial ventures were, according to rumor, less stable than his reputation suggested. Stefan spotted Otto near the towering floral arrangements, a glass of champagne in one hand. His mask, a flamboyant Venetian creation, adorned with feathers. Otto was laughing, a loud booming sound that carried above the orchestra's waltz. He was, with a small group of young officers, their uniforms impeccable, their conversations animated. Stefan decided against a direct approach. The most effective moves were often made from the periphery. He moved toward the buffet, where tables groaned under the weight of roasted meats, intricate pastries, and crystal bowls overflowing with exotic fruits. He selected a small piece of smoked salmon, watching Otto from behind the cover of a gilded pillar. Soon a young woman approached Otto, her mask a delicate lace confection that revealed sparkling blue eyes. She was Baroness Helena von Trapp, known for her sharp wit and even sharper tongue. Stefan knew she had recently inherited a significant estate. Helena was clearly teasing Otto, her laughter light and melodic. Otto, for his part, seemed captivated. This was an unexpected complication. Stefan changed his approach. He would not confront Otto directly, but would instead seek to subtly influence the perceptions around him. He found his cousin, Countess Eleonora von Schönbrunn, perched on a velvet bench, observing the crowd like a hawk. Eleonora was a mistress of court gossip, her network of informants rivaling that of the secret police. Her mask, a shimmering silver that matched her gown, gave her an ethereal quality. "Eleonora," Stefan said, his voice low, "you seem unusually pensive tonight." Eleonora turned. Her eyes narrowed slightly. "Stefan, always the charmer. I am merely observing the delicate dance of power." She gestured subtly towards Otto and Helena. "Our dear Archduke Otto seems quite taken with the young Baroness. A fortunate match, perhaps. Her lands border his own." Stefan allowed a faint smile to play on his lips. "Perhaps, or perhaps, her fortune is merely a distraction from his mounting debts. One hears such whispers, even in the most discreet circles. His latest venture in the Hunger," and the Archduchess Gisela was heard expressing her distress over her brother's habits, just last week at the Imperial Riding School. A fact noted by the venerable Frau Hofrat Schmidt. Eleonora's eyes gleamed. She understood. Stefan was not just passing gossip. He was planting seeds. The truth of Otto's finances mattered less than the perception that he was unstable. Helena, intelligent as she was, would certainly hear these whispers through Eleanor's network. And a woman of her means would be cautious. Later that evening, as the waltzes grew more fervent, Stefan sought out Otto again. This time, Helena was no longer by his side. Otto was alone, a slight frown on his face. He saw Stefan approaching, and offered a forced smile. "Indeed, your Imperial Highness," Stefan replied, bowing slightly. "A truly magnificent affair, though I confess I overheard a rather unfortunate rumor circulating about the Hungarian timber market. Apparently, some prominent investors are facing unexpected difficulties. One hopes it does not affect any projects close to the imperial family." Otto's smile faltered. "Business has its fluctuations, Count. Nothing of great concern." Stefan nodded slowly, a knowing look in his eyes. "Of course, one only wishes to ensure the prosperity of those who serve the crown. One would hate to see an unfortunate misstep, particularly one that might draw the attention of the imperial treasury as the emperor's financial advice." Herr von Meyer was Herr Hofri, Swan Porter. He bowed again, a gesture of polite dismissal, and melted back into the crowd. He had delivered his message. Otto would now be aware that his financial state was not as private as he wished. The network of whispers would ensure Helena heard too. The Archduchess Marie Valerie herself, though innocent in the evening's larger intrigues, simply danced with grace, unaware of the subtle machinations taking place beneath the mask of charity and celebration. The evening concluded with the unmasking, at midnight revealing faces that held new understandings, quiet triumphs, and unspoken defeats. The charity coffers were full, but more importantly, Stefan Czernin had begun his subtle reclamation of influence. Number 9. The Emperor's Diamond Jubilee Gala. The year was 1898, and Emperor Franz Joseph I had reigned for 50 years. The entire Austro-Hungarian Empire was awash in celebrations, but none compared to the sheer spectacle of the Diamond Jubilee Gala held within the imperial apartments of Schönbrunn Palace. Gold leaf shimmered on every surface. Thousands of candles cast a warm dancing glow, and the air was thick with the scent of lilies and the expensive perfumes of Europe's elite. This was a night not just of celebration, but of a carefully curated display of power and continuity. Empress Elizabeth, a woman of ethereal beauty, who often avoided large court functions, made a rare standing appearance. She wore a gown of white satin embroidered with silver threads, and in her famously long dark hair nestled among pearls were her diamond stars. Her presence was a blessing, a silent reassurance to the dynasty's enduring strength, though many whispered about her melancholic gaze even on such a joyous occasion. Her lady-in-waiting, Countess Sestare, observed her closely, a worried crease between her brows. Among the guests was the elderly, formidable Duchess of Hohenberg, whose family had served the Habsburgs for centuries. She moved with a slow, deliberate pace, her eyes missing nothing. She had seen countless jubilees, coronations, and funerals, and she knew the true meaning of such events lay not in the outward splendor, but in the subtle shifts of loyalty and ambition. Tonight her attention was fixed on a young rising diplomat from the Foreign Office, Baron von Kinsky, who had recently returned from a posting in London. Kinsky was strikingly handsome, with an easy smile and an even easier way with words. He was, however, from a less established aristocratic line, and many of the older nobles viewed him with a mixture of suspicion and grudging admiration. He was currently engaged in an animated conversation with a group of Hungarian magnates, their voices a low murmur, punctuated by Kinsky's occasional charming laugh. The Duchess had heard whispers that Kinsky was being considered for a highly sensitive ambassadorship, a position that required absolute discretion and unwavering loyalty to the Emperor's vision. Yet she also knew of his liberal leanings, a dangerous trait in a court as conservative as Franz Joseph's. The Duchess approached the group, her expression unreadable. "Baron von Kinsky," she said, her voice surprisingly strong for her age. It is a joy to see a young man of your talents so clearly enjoying His Majesty's grand celebration. Kinsky turned his smile, faltering slightly as he recognized her. He bowed deeply. Duchess, your presence graces this remarkable evening. Indeed, she replied, her gaze piercing. I was just recalling the jubilee of His Majesty's sainted father, Emperor Ferdinand. A different era, of course, but some things remain eternal, do they not? Loyalty, duty, a certain understanding of tradition. Her gaze flickered to the Hungarian magnates. Then back to Kinsky. Vienna, and sometimes those who come from afar find them challenging to master. I am told by a reliable source from the Imperial Council that the Emperor himself values adherence to the established pros. His liberal ideas, his inclination to push for more modern diplomacy were known. The Duchess was reminding him that the path to true power at this court lay in conformity, not innovation. The Hungarian magnates, sensing the shift in atmosphere, began to make their polite excuses and drift away. As the orchestra began a new waltz, the Duchess turned to Kinsky again. My nephew, Count Max, has recently returned from his studies in Paris. He finds Vienna rather slow after the intellectual vibrancy of the French capital. Perhaps you, with your recent experiences abroad, could offer him some counsel on how to adapt. Her words were innocent enough, but the implication was clear. Max, with his own progressive ideas, was a potential ally, or a potential spy. It would be my honor, Duchess. I would be delighted to share my insights with Count Max. The Duchess offered a faint, almost imperceptible nod. She had made her point. The Jubilee Gala, for all its dazzling display, was still a place where reputations were made and unmade, and where the subtle influence of old families continued to shape the destiny of the empire. Emperor Franz Joseph, observing the scene from a raised dais, occasionally exchanged a word with a favored general or minister, his gaze steady seemingly above the intricate social currents below. Yet every detail, every guest list had been approved by his meticulous hand. The Empress Elizabeth, meanwhile, drifted through the crowd, her beauty a silent, enigmatic statement, her thoughts likely far away from the glittering hall, perhaps lost in memories of a different time. The ball continued, a symphony of light and music, a testament to a long reign and a subtle reminder that even in celebration, the game of power never truly ceased. Number 8. The Winter Solstice Masquerade, December 1866. A chill wind rattled the windows of the Hofburg Palace, a stark reminder of the recent brutal war with Prussia. Austria had suffered a humiliating defeat at Königgrätz, and the empire was reeling. Yet court life, with its endless cycle of balls and receptions, continued a desperate attempt to project an image of stability and strength. The Winter Solstice Masquerade, held just before Christmas, was intended to lift spirits, to offer a brief respite from the gnawing anxieties of defeat. But beneath the masks the tension was palpable. Empress Elizabeth, who had spent much of the war tending to the wounded, looked drawn and pale, despite the elaborate costume she wore. A shimmering moonlit fairy queen, complete with delicate wings that seemed to droop slightly. Her husband, Emperor Franz Joseph, was dressed as a medieval knight, his mask a stern, unyielding expression of armor. He moved through the ball with a grim determination, engaging in brief, formal conversations, his focus clearly elsewhere. One of the more intriguing figures of the evening was Count Adalbert von Bismarck-Schönhausen, a distant cousin of the Prussian Chancellor. He was an unofficial observer, a representative of the victorious power, and his presence was both tolerated and resented. His mask was a simple, elegant black, revealing only his sharp, assessing eyes. He moved with a quiet efficiency, observing everything, saying little. He was known to carry a small, discreet notebook, and many wondered what observations he was jotting down. His eyes often landed on Baroness Clara von Ehrenfels, a young widow whose husband had fallen at Königgrätz. She wore a somber yet elegant black gown, her mask a delicate, almost mournful silver. She moved with a quiet dignity, but her sorrow was a palpable presence. She had inherited her husband's vast estates and, more importantly, his political connections within the conservative factions of the court. Bismarck, Schönhausen, decided to approach her. He bowed low. "Baroness von Ehrenfels, your costume, though understated, possesses a profound beauty." Clara turned, her eyes meeting his. "Thank you, sir. I find it difficult to celebrate with abandon when so many families mourn." Her voice was soft, but firm. "Indeed," he replied, his voice carefully modulated. "Loss is a universal experience. But perhaps in such times new opportunities arise. The Emperor, I hear, is seeking new advisors, particularly those with a clear vision for the future of the Empire. A future that may look different from the past." He paused. "I understand your late husband was highly regarded for it. Tamer tutti pres there it is. Kodas Sheb." He was testing her, subtly probing for any sign of a willingness to embrace change, perhaps even a rapprochement with Prussia. Her husband had been fiercely loyal to the old ways, the Habsburg traditions. "My husband," Clara said, her voice betraying a hint of emotion, "believed in duty and honor above all else. He gave his life for the Emperor and for Austria. It would be a disservice to his memory to abandon those principles. Lightly, incalme, to abandon those principles lightly. Principles are noble, Baroness, but pragmatism ensures survival. I also heard that your family's estates in Bohemia suffered considerable damage during the recent conflict. Reconsure, precopster recomit. The financial burden of the war was immense, and her lands were indeed ravaged." He was offering a subtle, almost irresistible inducement. Later, as the unmasking took place, Clara remained cloaked in her silver mask, for a moment longer than most, her eyes scanning the faces revealed. She saw Bismarck Schönhausen, his expression as impassive as ever, and she knew he was watching her. The ball, meant to be a distraction, had instead eliminated the stark choices facing the Empire and its people. Empress Elizabeth, her moonlit fairy costume now appearing fragile in the harsh light of dawn, retired early, a deep sadness in her eyes. Emperor Franz Joseph remained discussing strategy with his generals, the weight of a shattered empire resting heavily on his armored shoulders. The winter solstice masquerade had been a performance, yes, but its true drama had played out in the silent spaces between the waltzes, in the veiled words exchanged, and in the unspoken anxieties that gripped the heart of the court. Number 7. The Imperial Children's Name Day Ball. Spring of 1858 brought a rare moment of lightheartedness to the imperial court. It was the name day celebration for Archduchess Gisela, the Emperor's eldest daughter, and the young Crown Prince Rudolph. The Hofburg's marble hall, usually reserved for the most formal state occasions, was transformed into a whimsical wonderland. Floral garlands draped from every pillar, small, brightly colored lanterns hung among them, and a special stage was set for a puppet show, a rare treat for the younger members of the court. Emperor Franz Joseph, ever the diligent ruler, allowed himself a few fleeting smiles, while Empress Elizabeth, known for her love of children, seemed genuinely happy, even playful, for a change. However, even the children's ball at the Habsburg court was not without its undercurrents. The guest list included not only the children of the highest nobility, but also their parents and tutors, making it an informal gathering where subtle maneuvers could still take place. The Empress's Bavarian relatives were present, a lively, boisterous group that sometimes grated on the more formal Austrian sensibilities. Among them was the dashing Duke Max in Bavaria, Empress Elizabeth's father, who preferred folk music to opera and horses to diplomacy. One of the most talked-about attendees was the new governess for the imperial children, Countess Sophie von Weltenberg. She was young, intelligent, and had a reputation for being fiercely protective of her charges, sometimes even clashing with the emperor's more rigid expectations for their upbringing. She believed in encouraging their natural curiosity. a stark contrast to the severe military-style education often imposed on Habsburg heirs. At the ball, Countess Sophie observed a quiet drama unfolding near the punch bowl. Archduchess Gisela, a solemn child, was having a difficult time with her tutor, Herr Schmidt. Schmidt was a rigid disciplinarian, often seen scolding the young Archduchess for minor infractions, even on festive occasions. Gisela's lower lip trembled as Schmidt lectured her about holding her teacup correctly, his voice a low, insistent drone. Countess Sophie felt a surge of protectiveness. She knew that Gisela, sensitive and withdrawn, thrived on kindness, not strictness. She moved towards them, a gentle smile on her face. "Herr Schmidt," she said, her voice calm and even. He was not used to being challenged, especially in public, but the suggestion was polite, even deferential, yet firm. He could not refuse. He bowed stiffly to Sophie. "Certainly, Countess, an excellent suggestion." He then turned to Gisela, his voice a little softer. "Come, Archduchess, let us explore the wonders of the night sky." Gisela's face immediately brightened, and she eagerly followed him. Later, Countess Sophie found herself conversing with Baroness von Salis-Soglio, a formidable lady of the court, known for her strong opinions and close ties to the old aristocratic families, who valued tradition above all else. Baroness von Salis-Soglio had been a vocal critic of Empress Elizabeth's more unconventional approach to parenting, often comparing her methods unfavorably to the strict upbringing of Emperor Franz Joseph himself. "Countess Sophie," the Baroness began, her voice a low purr, "I observe you have a very modern approach to the children's education. One wonders if such methods truly prepare them for the rigors of imperial life. One Asher." "Baroness, I believe that true strength comes not from rigidity, but from a well-rounded spirit, and a mind capable of independence. The world is changing. Our children weed." The Baroness's lips thinned, but she had no immediate retort. Countess Sophie had subtly invoked the Emperor's own perceived wishes. A powerful argument even for the most traditional courtier. The ball continued. With children chasing each other amidst the lavish decorations, unaware of the subtle battles being fought over their very upbringing. Empress Elizabeth, seeing Gisela animatedly pointing at the celestial globe with Herr Schmidt, offered Countess Sophie a warm, grateful smile across the crowded room. The Imperial Children's Name Day Ball, ostensibly a celebration of innocence, had also served as a quiet testament to the shifting philosophies within the imperial household, where new ideas sometimes found a way to bloom, even amidst the most deeply rooted tradition. Number 6. The Grand Duchess's Debutante Ball. The year was 1840, and the Biedermeier era held Vienna in its gentle bourgeois embrace. Emperor Ferdinand I, though intellectually limited, presided over a period of relative calm, a calm that would soon be shattered by the revolutions of 1848. Tonight, however, the Schönbrunn Palace's great gallery was alive with the joyous anticipation of youth. The occasion was the debutante ball for Grand Duchess Maria Anna, a niece of the Emperor, marking her official entry into court society. The air hummed with nervous excitement from the young ladies and ambitious calculations from their parents. The ball was a symphony of pastel, silks, fresh flowers, and the lilting strains of a Strauss waltz. Young women in their pristine white gowns curtsied deeply, hoping to catch the eye of a suitable suitor, or at the very least secure a dance with a promising officer. Among the crowd was a young captain, Franz von Hohenlohe, recently returned from a posting in Milan. He was handsome, dashing, and possessed a quiet intensity that many found captivating. He was from an ancient, but not particularly wealthy family. His ambition, however, was immense. He watched the debutantes with a calculating eye, searching not just for beauty, but for opportunity. He had set his sights on Fräulein Amalia von Richter, whose family, though not of the highest nobility, had amassed a colossal fortune through industry and banking. Amalia was not the prettiest debutante, but she carried herself with a quiet confidence that intrigued him. Amalia, aware of the subtle social ladders of the court, felt a nervous flutter in her stomach. She knew her family's wealth was her strongest asset, but she longed for acceptance, not just toleration from the established aristocracy. She longed for genuine connection. She noticed Captain von Hohenlohe observing her, and felt a blush rise to her cheeks. Captain von Hohenlohe approached her. He bowed with an elegant flourish. "Fräulein von Richter, your gown is as lovely as the spring blossoms." Amalia curtsied. "Thank you, Captain. I confess I find these affairs rather overwhelming." "Understandable," he said, his voice gentle. "The court can be a labyrinth, but it is also a place of great opportunity. For those who understand its true nature, wonderment true natures." From the MP, he knew her family had significant investments in the new railway lines. Amalia's eyes widened slightly. This was not the usual empty flattery. "Indeed, Captain, my father has spoken much of the future of rail. He believes it is the key to Austria's prosperity." "A sentiment I wholeheartedly share," he replied, his gaze warm. "Perhaps, with your permission, I might seek a brief audience with your esteemed father. I have some ideas regarding the logistics of troop movement via rail, which might prove beneficial to both the Imperial Army and, dare I say, to your family's investment." He was offering a direct link to a potentially lucrative and prestigious military connection. At that moment, the formidable Princess Metternich, wife of the powerful Chancellor, swept past her eyes, scrutinizing every corner of the room. She was the arbiter of taste and social standing, and her approval was highly coveted. She glanced at Captain von Hohenlohe and Fräulein von Richter, her expression unreadable. She was known to disapprove of new money mixing too freely with old aristocracy. Captain von Hohenlohe, noticing her gaze, continued a little louder this time. "It is vital, Fräulein, that the Emperor's army embraces these modern advancements. The security of the Empire depends upon it." His Majesty's own military advisor, General von Reditz, expressed his fervent support for such modernization. Princess Metternich paused for a fraction of a second, her gaze lingering. The captain had subtly framed his interest in terms of imperial security and the Emperor's well-being, an argument that even she, with her traditional leanings, could not easily dismiss. He was not just pursuing a rich heiress, he was pursuing a strategic alliance that served the crown. Later, as the ball approached its climax, Captain von Hohenlohe was seen waltzing with Amalia von Richter, not once but twice. This was a clear signal of serious intent. Her parents, observing from the sidelines, exchanged knowing glances. The Grand Duchess, Maria Anna, herself a little overwhelmed by the attention, danced dutifully with a succession of young noblemen, a fixed, polite smile on her face, unaware of the quiet drama unfolding around her. The debutante ball, a celebration of youthful promise, had also served as a subtle stage for ambition, where new alliances were forged, not just through romance, but through the careful calculation of power and the strategic deployment of information. Number 5. The Congress of Vienna Peace Ball, September 1815. The Napoleonic Wars had finally ended, and the great powers of Europe had converged upon Vienna for a grand congress to redraw the map of the continent. Emperor Francis I, a quiet and conservative ruler, hosted a seemingly endless series of balls, banquets, and entertainments designed to keep the visiting monarchs and diplomats in good spirits, while the serious work of negotiation unfolded behind closed doors. The most extravagant of these was the Peace Ball held in the Imperial Riding School, transformed into a dazzling ballroom for the occasion. The hall thrummed with a nervous energy that belied the celebratory atmosphere. Princes, emperors, and ministers, all former adversaries, now mingled their smiles, often hiding suspicion and lingering resentments. The air was thick with the scent of pine boughs, imported flowers, and a heady perfume of intrigue. Among the myriad of foreign dignitaries was the enigmatic Russian Prince Alexander Voronov, a man known for his sharp mind and even sharper tongue. He was a close advisor to Tsar Alexander I and held considerable sway. He moved through the crowd with an easy grace, his eyes constantly scanning, assessing. His target for the evening was Baroness Léonie Dubois, a beautiful and exceptionally intelligent French diplomat, serving under Talleyrand. She was known for her ability to extract information disguised as innocent conversation. Léonie, aware of Voronoff's reputation, was cautious. She wore a gown of deep sapphire, an intentional choice to stand out in the sea of lighter fabrics, and a simple pearl necklace, a subtle statement of elegance without ostentation. She was engaged in a seemingly innocuous discussion about the latest Parisian fashions with an Austrian countess when Voronoff approached. "Baroness Dubois," he said, his voice a low, resonant baritone. "It is a pleasure to finally meet the intellect behind the exquisite taste. One hears much of your diplomatic finesse even in St. Petersburg." Léonie offered a polite curtsy. "Prince Voronoff, you flatter me. I am merely a humble observer of the grand tapestry of European society. A tapestry woven with many threads, some more visible than others," he replied, a hint of amusement in his eyes. "I was just discussing with a colleague the complexities of the Saxon question. Does it not? One hears that the British delegation is particularly insistent on certain concessions, a point explicitly emphasized by Lord Castlereagh to his personal secretary just yesterday morning. In his private study I received from my aide. He was subtly probing her knowledge of the French stance, and perhaps even their alliance with Britain on this issue." Léonie smiled, a brief, enigmatic flicker. "Indeed, Prince, international relations are rarely simple. However, I believe His Majesty King Louis XVIII. France, after all, seeks only a lasting peace, built on a foundation of equity, a principle articulated in countless communiques from the French Foreign Ministry, copies of which are surely available to your Highness's embassy." She deftly redirected, giving nothing away, while subtly asserting France's official position. Voronoff leaned closer, his voice dropping slightly. "Equity. Yes, but sometimes equity must yield to necessity. One also hears that the French treasury is rather depleted after years." He was suggesting that France might be willing to compromise for financial gain. Léonie's expression remained serene. "The resilience of the French people is boundless. Prince, our treasury will recover, as will our national spirit, and our resolve for a just peace is stronger than any temporary fiscal challenge. As Monsieur Talleyrand himself is fond of saying, principles are not for sale, even at the highest price," a statement he made to a galling of diplomats just 2 nights ago, a comment relayed to me by my most trusted aide. She countered his insinuation with an elegant assertion of French strength and principle. Just then the Austrian Chancellor Metternich, the architect of the Congress, entered the main ballroom, his presence commanding attention. He glanced at Voronoff and Léonie, a slight knowing smile on his lips. He was aware of the constant dance of information gathering that permeated every event. Voronoff offered Léonie a slight bow. "A most illuminating conversation, Baroness. Perhaps we shall continue it over supper." Léonie curtsied again. "Perhaps, Prince. The evening is young." As the waltzes resumed, both Léonie and Voronoff understood that no mere social pleasantry had been exchanged. Information had been sought, subtly offered and deftly withheld. Emperor Francis I, observing his guests from a distance, appeared outwardly calm, but he knew the true work of the Congress was not just in the formal negotiations, but in these countless veiled splendor of his grand peace ball. The fate of Europe was being decided, one whispered word at a time beneath the glittering chandeliers of Vienna. Number 4. The Spring Awakening Fête, April 1785. Emperor Joseph II, the enlightened monarch, was known for his reforms and his impatience with courtly excess. Yet even he understood the necessity of maintaining a certain level of grandeur, especially to impress foreign dignitaries. The Spring Awakening Fête, held in the vast gardens of Schönbrunn Palace, was a testament to this delicate balance. It was a less formal affair than a ball. A garden party that extended late into the night, lit by thousands of lanterns strung among the trees, and reflected in the palace's fountains. The focus was on nature renewal and the flourishing of arts and sciences, themes dear to the emperor's heart. The guests, dressed in lighter, more naturalistic styles than the heavy brocades of earlier decades, mingled amidst the blooming flower beds and classical statues. Musicians played light airs from hidden alcoves, and elaborate fireworks displays were promised at midnight. Among the guests was the formidable Countess Eleonora Kinsky, a woman of sharp intellect and progressive views, a rare breed at court. She was a supporter of Joseph's reforms, particularly his efforts to modernize education and social welfare. She was engaged in a lively debate near the newly installed botanical garden with Professor Anton von Born, a prominent scientist whom the emperor admired. Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Baroness Sophie von Plettenberg, a staunch conservative who believed that Joseph's reforms were eroding the very foundations of Austrian society. She was particularly vexed by the emperor's recent decree on religious tolerance. Her gown, though fashionable, seemed to cling to the heavier, more traditional styles of the past. "Countess Kinsky," Baroness von Plettenberg began, her voice edged with a delicate frost, "you seem quite taken with these botanical curiosities. One prefers the more enduring beauty of classical sculpture. Perhaps these ephemeral blossoms seem raised, eh? Bearer, change is the very essence of life. Just as these flowers bloom anew each spring, so too must the Steph. To stas the Empanbergs." To subtly invoke the emperor's own words, especially his known radical sentiments, was a powerful move. And these scientific endeavors, one hopes they do not distract from the spirals. There are those who fear that too much focus on earthly knowledge can lead to a disregard for heavenly truths. Archbishop Christoph Migbati, for instance, Ackertroff de Froff. Baroness, true faith, I believe, is strengthened. I understand a sign, not by Immerd bes Fiftenosh, in Sulfen Pormeris. The Baroness. That knowledge can illuminate God's own creation. As his personal fisting, Dr. Anton Stork, marked to me at a recent court. Athami by T. The Countess had deftly defended the emperor's reforms by framing them within the very values the conservatives claimed to uphold: progress, strength, and even piety. The Emperor Joseph II, who had been observing the conversation from a distance, merely offered a slight, almost imperceptible nod to Countess Kinsky as he moved past. He valued intelligent debate, even if it meant challenging the old guard. He had specifically invited individuals like Countess Kinsky to his court to encourage such discussions. As the sun set and the lanterns began to glow, the Spring Awakening Fete continued, a beautiful, sprawling testament to a changing era. The fireworks burst into color above the Schönbrunn gardens, each explosion a fleeting, brilliant statement. And amidst the light and laughter, the subtle battle of ideas continued, shaping the future of the Habsburg Empire. One quiet, reasoned argument at a time. Number 3. The Archduchess's betrothal, Balpart, November 1770. The Grand Ball, or Balapar, celebrating the betrothal of Archduchess Maria Antonia to the Dauphin of France, was an event of staggering opulence. Empress Maria Theresia, a woman of deep piety and formidable will, had orchestrated this marriage to cement the alliance between Austria and France, a reversal of centuries of enmity. The Hofburg Palace was a blaze of light, with thousands of candles illuminating the hall of ceremonies, where guests, in their finest silks, brocades, and powdered wigs, moved in a dazzling, intricate dance. This was a political statement, draped in luxury, a display of dynastic power. Maria Antonia, a young woman of only 15, looked radiant. Though a touch overwhelmed in her elaborate gown of white and silver, she was the focal point of the evening, her future laid out before her, a pawn in the grand game of European politics. Her older sister, Archduchess Maria Carolina, who would soon marry the King of Naples, watched her with a mixture of affection and thinly veiled jealousy. Among the most powerful guests was the French ambassador, the Baron de Breteuil, a man of exquisite manners, but sharp political acumen. He was observing everything, assessing the strength of the alliance, and subtly gauging the character of the young Archduchess. His gaze often settled on her new French tutor, Monsieur de Vermont, who, despite his humble origins, held considerable influence over Maria Antonia. The ambassador decided to approach Monsieur de Vermont, who was standing somewhat awkwardly near a group of laughing Austrian courtiers. "Monsieur de Vermont," the Baron said, his voice smooth as silk, "a magnificent celebration, and your young charge, the Archduchess, a vision of grace. You have done wonders with her education in so short a time." Monsieur de Vermont, flattered by the attention from such a high-ranking diplomat, bowed deeply. "Your Excellency, the Archduchess, is a most willing and intelligent. She shows a remarkable aptitude for music and dance, perhaps less so for history or complex political theory, as I noted in my recent report to the Solemn." The ambassador's eyes sharpened. This was valuable information. A queen more interested in entertainment than in statecraft could be a valuable asset to French interests. "Indeed," he replied, a subtle smile playing on his lips. "A discerning spirit. One hopes, however, that her understanding, just last week, this also Roguin, the future of two great nations, rests on her shoulders." Monsieur de Vermont, sensing the subtle pressure, became a little flustered. "Of course, Your Excellency, we are endeavoring to impress upon her the gravity of her position, though one must admit her attention sometimes wanders during discussions of the pragmatic sanction or the complexity of the Silesian fraction." The ambassador nodded, his smile widening almost imperceptibly. He had learned what he needed to know. Maria Antonia was charming, but perhaps easily distracted. This meant that influence over her would be critical. He would ensure that those who surrounded her in Versailles understood her predilections. Later, as the Archduchess, Maria Antonia danced a stately minuet with a young Austrian nobleman, she caught the eye of her mother, Empress Maria Therese. Emperor Therese de Spurs, with her husband Emperor Francis I. Maria Therese's expression was one of quiet satisfaction, mixed with a hint of melancholy. She had secured the alliance, but she knew the challenges her youngest daughter would face in the opulent yet treacherous French court. The betrothal bal pargay, meant to celebrate a union of hearts, was in truth a careful exchange of power, a prelude to a story that would unfold across the continent, with consequences far beyond the glittering ballroom. The music played on a grand deceptive overture to a tumultuous reign. Number 2. The Imperial Hunting Lodge Ball. October 1756. The 7 Years' War had just erupted, a conflict that would redefine the balance of power in Europe. Yet, in a quiet corner of the Wienerwald, at the Emperor's Hunting Lodge of Luxembourg, a less formal yet still opulent ball was held. Empress Maria Theresia, often portrayed as a stern monarch at these private gatherings. This ball was ostensibly a celebration of a successful hunt, but in truth it was a subtle opportunity for the Empress to gauge the loyalty and morale of her key military commanders and advisors before the long, difficult war ahead. The lodge was smaller, more intimate than the Hofburg, allowing for closer observation. The lodge's main hall, adorned with hunting trophies and rich tapestries, was transformed into a festive ballroom. Musicians played lively folk tunes alongside classical pieces, and the Emperor Francis I, who preferred hunting to affairs of state, was in his element, laughing heartily with his generals. Among the guests was Field Marshal Leopold von Daun, a shrewd and cautious strategist, whom the Empress trusted implicitly. He was engaged in a quiet conversation with Count Wenzel Anton Kaunitz, her astute foreign minister, who had just engineered the Ground-Ring alliance. With France, their expressions were serious, their voices low. A younger, more ambitious general, Count Johann von Lacy, known for his aggressive tactics and his occasional impetuousness, was circulating among the younger officers, his booming laughter carrying across the room. Lacy was a brilliant military mind, but Maria Theresia knew he sometimes chafed under Dawn's more conservative approach. The Empress, observing from a slightly elevated position near the fireplace, decided to approach Lacy. She rarely engaged in such direct conversations at social events, but the urgency of the war demanded it. Her presence alone silenced the boisterous group. "Count Lacy," she said, her voice clear and strong, though not loud, "I trust the hunt was to your satisfaction." Lacy, startled by her direct address, bowed deeply. "Your Imperial Majesty." "It was a most excellent outing. The deer were plentiful." "Good," she replied, her gaze piercing. "Marshal Daun, for instance, in a recent tactical briefing to the Imperial staff, emphasized the importance of preserving our forces above all else, a point he stressed to me, personally, just yesterday morning." He knew the Empress was testing him, weighing his ambition against his willingness to follow orders. "Your Majesty, I believe in striking hard and swiftly when the opportunity presents itself. Boldness can be a virtue in war." "Indeed," Maria Theresia said, her eyes fixed on his. "But a virtue tempered by wisdom. A general must know when to strike in pike and maeve. And worse, an entire campaign. I recall my father, Emperor Charles VI, once telling me that victory often comes not to the swiftest blade, but to the steadiest hand, a wisdom I have found profoundly true in my own reign, a sentiment I recorded in my private journal after the War of the Austrians." She was subtly reminding him of her own military experiences and the consequences of rash decisions. Lacy understood the veiled reprimand. He was being warned against acting independently of Dawn or of her overall strategy. He bowed again, his expression more subdued. "Your Majesty, I shall endeavor to serve with both boldness and wisdom. My loyalty is unwavering." Maria Theresia gave a slight nod. She had made her point. She then turned her attention to Dawn and Kaunitz, who had approached. The conversation shifted to logistics and supply lines, the grim realities of war pushing through the festive atmosphere. The Imperial hunting lodge ball, for all its rustic charm, had served its true purpose. Maria Theresia had subtly reinforced her authority, tempered the ambition of a promising but impetuous general, and affirmed her trust in her most valued advisors. Emperor Francis I, unaware of the subtle machinations, continued to enjoy the festivities, a benevolent if somewhat detached presence. As the evening wore on, the knowledge that a long and brutal war lay ahead hung in the air, a sobering counterpoint to the laughter and music. But for one night, amidst the warmth of the lodge, the Empress had asserted her command, preparing her forces not just for battle, but for loyalty and disciplined execution. Number 1. The Grand Entry Masquerade. January 1745. The War of the Austrian Succession was still raging, but a brief respite allowed for a moment of triumph. Empress Maria Theresia, after years of defending her inheritance against powerful enemies, had finally secured the election of her husband, Francis Stephen, as Holy Roman Emperor. To celebrate this momentous occasion, a grand entry, masquerade, was held at the Hofburg Palace, a dazzling display of newly asserted power and renewed confidence. The entire court was instructed to wear fantastical costumes and elaborate masks, symbolizing the Judy nature of the new imperial reign. The great redoubt room, usually reserved for the most formal gatherings, was a riot of color, sound, and disguised identities. Harlequins mingled with exotic sultans, goddesses danced with mythological beasts, and the air crackled with the excitement of anonymity. Maria Theresia herself, still recovering from childbirth, appeared as a majestic Roman empress, her costume radiating authority. Emperor Francis Stephen, for his part, was a jovial Jupiter, reveling in his newfound imperial title. Among the masked throng was the Venetian ambassador, a shrewd and watchful diplomat who was known for his vast network of spies, and his ability to glean information from the most unlikely sources. He wore a simple, elegant black domino, allowing him to observe, without drawing undue attention. His primary interest tonight was Prince Georg Adam von Starhemberg, one of Maria Theresia's most trusted, albeit cautious, advisors, who was known to harbor reservations about some of the Empress's more aggressive military strategies. Starhemberg, dressed as a benevolent philosopher, was deep in conversation with a masked figure dressed as a medieval knight, whom the ambassador suspected was General Joseph Wenzel von Liechtenstein, a close confidant of the Empress. The ambassador drifted closer, feigning interest in a nearby display of exotic birds. The latest financial reports from the Imperial Treasury, which I reviewed just this morning, paint a rather stark picture. The knight whom the ambassador now confirmed was Liechtenstein replied, his voice firm. "Prince, the Empress's resolve is unwavering. She believes that a lasting peace can only be achieved from a position of strength from a stee." This was precisely the kind of division within the court that Venice could exploit or leverage. He then spotted a third figure approaching Starhemberg, Countess Charlotte von Waldstein, a lady-in-waiting to the Empress, known for her sharp intelligence and her unshakable loyalty to Maria Theresia. She was dressed as a classical muse, her mask a delicate, almost mournful expression. Countess Charlotte joined the conversation, her voice gentle but firm. I remember hearing her say to her personal confessor, Father Johann von Klessel, that a strong front is imperative when facing a determined foe. A piece of wisdom I have always taken to heart. Starhemberg's shoulders seemed to slump slightly under the weight of her words. He respected the Countess's judgment, and he knew her words directly reflected the Empress's own convictions. The ambassador, observing the exchange, realized the extent of Maria Theresia's control. She had clearly ensured that her loyalists, even in a masked setting, would subtly reinforce her policies, even against the cautious counsel of her own advisors. The masked ball was not just a celebration. It was a carefully orchestrated display of unified purpose. As the unmasking began at dawn, revealing faces that held faint smiles and weary eyes, the Venetian ambassador saw Prince Starhemberg standing alone. For a moment, his philosopher's mask clutched in his hand, a look of quiet resignation on his face. He knew then that Maria Theresia, despite her youth and her many battles, possessed a formidable will and an astute understanding of court dynamics. The grand entry masquerade, intended as a jubilant celebration of imperial status, had also served as a subtle demonstration of Maria Theresia's unwavering authority. The Habsburg court, even in its most playful moments, never truly ceased its intricate dance of power.